In Module 18, you're going to learn about both aggregate supply curves. We have a vertical LRAS, long run aggregate supply, and an upward sloping SRAS for short run aggregate supply. Both of these lines are going to have shifters and be impacted differently. Both of these are required part of a fully labeled ADAS model. The axes are just the same because you can imagine the 80 line being superimposed over this model. So the y-axis can be labeled APL for aggregate price level or PL for regular price level. And then the x-axis can be labeled real GDP or aggregate output. If AD declined or shifted left, that would mean that prices went down as well. Also, if AD shifted left, that would impact the quantity of supply, the SRAS. So if we had, this was our original AD line, and then it shifts left, so we have AD2, sorry. You can see that the move along, even though AD shifted, it's a move along the curve on SRAS, and because the move along the curve is to the left, it would be a decrease in short-run aggregate supply. The quantity of short-run aggregate supply decreased. Remember that if the line itself shifts, increase or decrease. So here AD decreased, shifted left, but the quantity of SRAS decreased. Wanted to remind you of that. The aggregate supply curve, the short-run aggregate supply curve, is going to be the relationship between APL, the aggregate price level, and the quantity of aggregate output, or our GDP supplied in the economy. And you can see that this is a positive relationship because as the price level goes up, the quantity supplied of all goods goes up. So aggregate supply is going to show us all goods and services in the economy. We have two different aggregate supply curves because one of them is short run and one of them is long run. So overall, or aggregate supply in the economy is different if we're talking about all of the supply in the short run. And by the way, short run is 1 year or less, or in the long run, so over a year. In the short run, there is a positive slope. There's a positive relationship between the aggregate price level and the quantity of overall output supplied, which makes sense. If prices are going up, producers of all goods and services are willing to produce more. So that short run supply is what you guys are used to. In the simple supply, that's how supply worked. People responded to a profit incentive. But in the long run, things are different. We're going to talk at length about why things are different in the long run. But basically, the price incentive goes away. You can see that LRAS is vertical, meaning that even if the price goes up from here to here, you can see that the quantity of LRAS doesn't move. It stays in this vertical position. This quantity is often labeled YP. This is for potential output in the economy. So we're going to figure out how much is the potential that we can produce, because in the long run you settle into that potential quantity. And basically, as prices go up, let's say your sales price has risen, but if the inputs and the cost and the labor cost it takes you to produce the good have risen too, then your profit kind of negates itself. It's a wash. So in the long run, the changes in prices starts to balance each other out. If everything is getting more expensive, then your profit isn't as strong because you have to pay for all of your materials at a higher price too. So we'll explain this more. As long as you understand, short run, we have a positive relationship between price and quantity. In the long run, the effective price gets reduced as all prices are going to change in the long run. And so in the long run, LRAS settles at our potential level. How much real GDP could we make if we are at full employment? From the earlier modules on supply, you learned that the goal of producers, the number one thing that they're concerned about is to earn profit, that when profit goes up, producers are willing to supply more of that individual product. Now, that still works on the aggregate scale, as long as you realize that producers are kind of following the same method of determining profit. They want to figure out, is each unit profitable? So profit per unit, the equation, equals sales price per unit minus production cost per unit. So price from the producer point of view is how much they can sell it for. So producers want the price to be as high as possible for the goods that they're selling. And hopefully the production cost will be low. So they're going to look at each unit, sales price minus production cost. Because occasionally when you decide to make one more unit, it can cut into your profit. This is called the marginal cost, because the cost of making just one more, a small number more. So let's say all of a sudden that you now have to pay your workers overtime because you're producing more. Well, now your production costs have increased and it would cut into that profit per unit. Or now you have to hire more workers to be able to keep up with all of that production. And now that you've had a certain number of employees, you're required to give them health insurance or some sort of benefits. That will increase the production cost. So sales price minus an increased production cost will reduce the profit per unit. So they're going to look at each individual unit decision. It's not, should I make lasagna? It's, if I make more lasagna, what's the profit for each additional item to determine if that's a smart decision. Here are the practice problems from the notes. Suppose that the price of a unit of output increased, but production cost of that unit stayed the same. What is happening to profit per unit? Remember, price from the perspective of supply is sales price. So if the sales price is increasing, but production costs are staying the same, the overall profit is increasing. So should that unit be produced? Absolutely. And then we have a question with numbers. What if the price of output increased 5% while the production cost increased 1%? In that case, your net profit would be 4%. There might be a certain amount of profit that you had beforehand, but we just know that your profit changed by increasing 4%. So is it profitable? Yes. Should it be produced? Yes. So bottom line, if the price of a unit of output is rising faster than the cost of producing that output, that unit should be produced. If it's profitable, it's going to be produced in the economy. So it's okay if prices are rising. Prices do go up. We expect that in our economy. We just want to make sure that the sales price is going up faster than production prices, and then we're fine. So in the short run, this is true. In the short run, some prices might be going up faster than others, so you can still see the impact on profit. And we need the profit incentive for short-run aggregate supply to have that positive slope. As price level goes up, people want to produce or supply a higher quantity overall. SRAS will increase. Now, in the long run, that profit incentive goes away as all prices start to change the same amount. There's lots of different types of costs when we talk about production costs, and many of the costs producers face are fixed. A fixed cost means that you're locked in for whatever reason. So the biggest area of fixed costs are wages. If you have told your employees that you're going to pay them $10 an hour, you can't all of a sudden start paying them $8 an hour just to increase your profit, because that's a fixed cost. You can hire a new employee at a lower wage, but all of your existing employees, you're locked in to that price. So wages can also be fixed. Also, let's say you are producing something and you need steel. If you bought 1 ton of steel at a certain price, then those input costs are fixed. You're already locked into that set amount of time. So it will be a while, but eventually you can change fixed costs. Do you see how they're fixed and they can't be changed for long periods? So over many years, Could you hire some cheaper employees and fix that? Yes. Over many years, if your steel costs are too high, could you switch to something else that's less expensive? Yes. So costs are only fixed in the short run, not in the long run. And it's also important to keep in mind that wages are just one part of the cost of labor. If you have promised your employees healthcare that you pay for, that's a fixed cost too. And that's locked in, and you can't just cancel it if it's part of their contract. Retirement benefits, vacation benefits, anything like that, if you put it into the contract of your workers, it's fixed. Now, you can hire new employees without those benefits. So in the long run, you could get out of that fixed agreement, or you can renegotiate existing contracts. But in the short term, it's fixed. You can't change it. So we have some new terms to get into here, like sticky wages. But before we talk about what that is, I'm going to get into nominal wage, and then, of course, compare that to real wages. So the nominal wage is the dollar amount of the wage paid. So if you're getting $7.25 an hour, that's your nominal wage. So that might go up, but we don't know how much inflation is going up to figure out your real wage. The listed wage that is not adjusted for inflation is your nominal wage. Just because you have 2% inflation occurring doesn't mean you're automatically going to get a 2% raise, does it? So nominal wages do not change automatically. You have to ask for a raise, or your employer has to offer one to respond to inflation and things like that. And that's why wages are considered sticky. And it's a funny word. But sticky is also a very good economic word. And something that is sticky is slow to change. And what this means, imagine if there's literally a piece of gum on your desk. If there's gum on your desk, you can probably get it off, but it'll take you a while of prying and picking and scraping to get that sticky piece of gum off. So, can you change those sticky conditions? Yes, but it takes time. And this is how it applies to economics. Nominal wages are sticky. They're not going to immediately change. So when we have a period of high unemployment, wages are actually supposed to fall. And let me explain this. If unemployment is super high, like 20% unemployment, that means you have tons of people looking for a job, right? And if lots and lots of people are looking for a job, is there somebody out there that will accept less? Absolutely. So the more people that are there looking for work, wages actually fall because you would hire people to a lower level. So on average, wages start to go down. Now, you can't cut the wages of your current employees. That would cause a rebellion. That would be a problem. But if over time you start hiring people that are cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and your current employees start to retire or move on to the next job, etc., do you see how your average nominal wage starts to fall? So wages are slow to fall. They're not going to fall immediately. Opposite example, a labor shortage would be when unemployment is really low. There aren't enough workers. And if there aren't enough workers, people can be really picky and they can demand more money. So wages should rise. So those new people looking for jobs can demand more money. But that doesn't mean that all of the current people who have a job are all going to get a raise right away. There's going to be a slow change because wages are sticky. So will eventually wages go up in that situation? Yes, but not immediately. So this idea is that as prices go up, wages eventually go up, but it takes time. As prices go down, wages eventually go down. But again, there's a delay because wages are sticky. So you can have renegotiations of current contracts. You probably have a contract for a year. At the end of that year, we can change it. So we think of wages as this big example of a sticky term, but other inputs could be sticky as well. So a major commodity is something that many different parts of the economy need, like oil or steel or glass. or plastic. And so these things could be slow to change if they're such a big part of the economy, but they will eventually respond to the change. So a sticky price means it is going to change, but it will change slowly. On the last slide, you saw how wages respond to high or low unemployment. Now, that's something I just kind of skimmed over, but you do have to understand what's going to happen to wages when unemployment is high or low. So I wanted to go step by step and see how labor markets impact these nominal wages. So first of all, we have a strong economy. So we're in a recovery. Demand for products is high. Sales are high, so producers decide to raise prices. If demand is high, you can raise prices and get away with it because there's still people that want to buy your stuff. So we have prices going up. You would think that wages will go up too because wages are prices. But we know that wages are sticky, so we're going to see how they go up slowly in this process. Okay, so when those producers raise their prices, that makes their profits go up. And in order to keep up with this high demand and this high output, they need to hire more workers. So you hire more workers, unemployment is low. When unemployment is low, then people can be picky, as we were talking about. They can demand a higher wage because these producers really need to hire people to fill this in. Now, if profit is high, producers might be willing to hire these new employees at a higher price, but their current employees are going to be resentful of that. I have more experience. Why are you paying this new person at a higher price? And producers don't want to give raises across the board. So at the beginning, you start seeing this slow increase in wages. Maybe some people are getting raises. Maybe some new employees are getting paid at a higher rate to entice them to take that job. So eventually, as output keeps going up and unemployment keeps going down, you're going to have a case of competition for workers. When unemployment is low, the producer becomes desperate. They need a qualified employee. Fine, I'll pay you more. And when that starts happening, the experienced workers are going to demand an increase of their wages, and now you finally have wages going up. So what happened first? Prices went up. Eventually, that will lead to the price of labor or nominal wages going up, but it's going to be slow because nominal wages are sticky. Now we'll do the opposite example, a weak economy. We're in a recession. Demand starts going down. So producers realize they're selling fewer units, the prices start to fall in a recession, and their profits start to fall. Now, if they're selling less stuff and their profits are going down, they're going to need to fire people, right? To stay in business, you have to reduce employment. So unemployment goes up. When unemployment is high, you have a lot of people looking for work. Now, if they're trying to cut costs, the employers cannot lower the nominal wages of their current employees, right? If your boss told you all of a sudden you now have to start accepting $5 an hour because money is tight, most people would quit. Or they'd be upset, or they'd go on strike, or they would become a lot less productive and wouldn't do very much for that wage. So the idea is employers want to lower wages because prices went down, but they can't immediately. Also, they probably have contracts for some of their employees, and those prices are therefore fixed in the short run during the length of that contract. When the contract is up for renewal, it could be renegotiated. All of those new employees that get hired are going to get hired at a lower wage because when unemployment is high and a lot of people are looking for work, somebody is going to be desperate enough to take a job for less money. So when the new hires are getting hired for less and wages are getting negotiated down with the contracts, now all of a sudden nominal wages will eventually fall. So first, output prices fell, as demand fell. And then eventually the price of labor and nominal wages falls. So no matter what, I hope you're seeing price changes first. That affects unemployment. And the change in unemployment is what affects the price of labor, the nominal wage. So far, all of that information about wages, nominal wages, sticky wages, all of that stuff is true in the short run. In the short run, we have these sticky prices and we care about prices. Prices are our motivator. So now that we're still talking about short run, we're going to do shifts of SRAS, the short run aggregate supply curve. Now, this is true for all the supply and demand lines. If SRAS decreases, it shifts to the left. If it increases, it shifts to the right. Now, an increase is also called an outward shift. I want us to see that. And the concept of outward is, see this corner here? That's in. So if you're going towards the corner, so when we decrease here, do you see how we had this line and now we have this line? We're getting closer to the corner, inward shift. When we went to the right, we were here, further away, outward shift. It's about this interior corner. So I just want you to be aware of inward shift or outward shift in case you ever get a multiple choice question that asks you about that. But generally speaking, decrease is left shift, increase is right shift. Remember, there is no shift up or shift down because with supply especially, if this is your SRAS, and I will try to write it, but I know this pen is a little small here for the font size. All right, good enough. Okay, so if it decreased, it would shift to the left. So a lot of people might look at this and think, oh, wait, it shifted up. No, it didn't. It shifted left, which is a decrease. So remember that left and right we need. We'll never say it shifted up or it shifted down. It didn't. It shifts left or right. Short run aggregate supply is the aggregate supply line that does respond to profit. As the aggregate price level goes up, the profit goes up and your desire to supply it goes up. So the non-shifter is APL. Aggregate price level is the one thing that's the non-shifter. And remember, APL can go by many names. Inflation rate, deflation rate, CPI, PPI, GDP deflator. Any of those things are telling you that the overall price level changed, so all of those are non-shifters. These three things below are the shifters. Changes in commodity prices, changes in nominal wages, and changes in productivity will impact profit per unit and shift the entire SRAS curve. Commodity prices deal with commodities, which are important to realize. They are standardized inputs bought and sold in bulk. These are huge goods in our economy. Oil, copper, steel, wood, glass, rubber, petroleum. These things are used by so many industries that the prices of them have huge impacts. There's also non-industrial commodities like corn. Think about all the different goods that corn is in. And it's not just food, it's also ethanol, I think corn syrup. So it gets into so many different products. So commodities are things. It's not just one price. Because of course one price would not have an effect on aggregate model. But commodity prices do because they impact businesses all over the nation on a big scale. These are going to be shifters. It's also important to realize that commodities are inputs, not final goods. So let's say the price of all of those commodities did go up. That doesn't necessarily mean we have inflation because we haven't seen those changes reflected in the price of final goods yet. Now you can imagine that if the price of all of these commodities go up, producers are going to respond and they're going to end up raising their sales price. That's in the long run. In the short run, this cuts into their profit. So if the commodities, the things you need to make all of these products cost more, what happens to profit? It goes down. And when profit goes down, SRAS decreases. And a decrease is a left shift. If commodity prices become more affordable, then your profit increases and SRAS would shift to the right. I'm trying to show you that with an SRAS shifter, you want to ask the question of how does this affect profit? Because if it increases profit, SRAS shifts right. If it decreases profit, SRAS shifts left. Nominal wages are the price of labor. We learned in normal supply that labor is an input. An input was a shifter. So if labor costs went up, supply would go down. That's basically the same thing here, but a little bit more complicated. There's a little bit more levels to nominal wages. Now on the base level, nominal wages are inputs, and the price of labor, nominal wage. Okay, so we've learned that nominal wages are sticky. They're going to change gradually. But if your employees cost you more, what happens to profit? It goes down. So if profit goes down, SRAS shifts to the left. If your nominal wages have gone down, profit rises, SRAS shifts right. So nominal wage is how much you pay them per hour. But there's other things that impact the price of your labor. So employee compensation, that's just the basic wage. But there's other things like cost of living adjustments. If you promise your employees that you will pay them more when price levels change, that's going to impact the input cost as well. Any other things like health insurance, retirement benefits, a pension, employee vacations, all of those things impact costs. So all those nice things that you do for your employees make labor costs go up. And anything that makes labor costs go up would make SRAS shift left. Anything that makes labor costs go down, SRAS will shift to the right because you have more profit. The last shifter of SRAS is very literal. 1 and 2 impacted profit, commodity prices, and nominal wages. Number 3, productivity is about can your workers produce more? Can they supply more? If workers are more productive, they are able to supply more. So this could be giving them better tools and pieces of capital equipment. This could mean making your employees more educated, smarter, healthier. This could be giving them electricity, giving them internet access, letting a machine help them out. So individual workers can be more productive if they have these tools that help them. So anything that makes productivity go up, they can supply more. SRAS shifts right. If productivity goes down, the tools are breaking. The technology is unreliable. The workers are constantly calling in sick. All of those things are going to make them less productive. If productivity goes down, SRAS will shift to the left. Now we're going to start talking about the long run aggregate supply curve. And remember, this one is vertical. And the reason why this supply is vertical is because in the long run, contracts get to be renegotiated. Labor contracts, but also contracts for all of those inputs and materials that you need. So in the long run, all prices are flexible. And that's important. The concept of a price being sticky, it's only sticky in the short run. In the long run, nothing is sticky. It's only flexible. And all prices are impacted by inflation or deflation. And this is what that means. So let's say labor costs keep going up. They're going up, they're going up, they're going up. You're stuck with those employees. But after years of that, you might realize, okay, this is ridiculous. I can't pay these prices. So in the long run, maybe you will have fewer employees to keep labor costs down and start using machines or assembly lines to assemble things. Or in the long run, if labor costs are high, you could open up a location in another country. offshore and have employers, your labor costs go down that way. Or you could hire people and not give them benefits for those new employees. So there's all kinds of things you can do to have prices be flexible in the long run. And that's just labor. If you're using a commodity and that commodity is constantly costing you more, over time you'll figure out a way to use a different material instead. So if your energy costs are too high, you might switch to a renewable source. If you are feeling like steel is too expensive, you're going to switch to aluminum or a different metal. In the long run, instead of going out of business, you're going to figure out something else. So in the long run, all prices, truly all prices, are flexible. And for that reason, aggregate price level has no impact in the long run on the quantity you supply. Because if your sales price is going up, remember how profit was sales price minus production cost? Well, if your production costs go up, but they're flexible, your sales price is going to go up too. Those things are going to cancel each other out. All the prices are going to start changing the same over years and years and years. And here's what I mean by that, these two examples. If all prices on all goods went down 30%, so we have deflation, nominal wage is a price too. It's sticky, it's slow to change, but that's only in the short run. So in the long run, all prices go down, including your labor costs, nominal wage, including the price of the inputs, and the price of the final goods and services. So your production costs are your inputs and your nominal wages. Your sales price is the final goods and services. So if everything is going down 30%, did your profit change at all? No. So is there any impact on long-run aggregate supply? No, because they all change the same amount. And the next example, if all prices of all goods quadrupled, so everything costs 4 times more, wages cost 4 times more, inputs cost 4 times more, so your total input, your production costs went up 4 times, but your sales price went up 4 times too. So in that case, your profit is not affected in the long run. LRAS is not going to be impacted. Now that we've seen some examples, here we have the bottom line. If the price of output, sales price, increases 5%, and over time, we know wages are sticky, but eventually they're going to increase 5% too. If all those things increase the same amount, you no longer have a profit incentive. You no longer have a reason to increase your output. So that's why LRAS is vertical, because we have APL. And what shows us output? Real GDP. So if all prices went up 5%, that means that our, let me just go ahead and finish labeling this, LRAS. Okay, so prices went up, so we were here, now we're here. Do you see how your price went up? But nothing happened over here, there's nothing, we don't know, there's no change. That tells you that the only impact is APL, is inflation. There's no change on real GDP in the long run. In this picture here, aggregate price level is falling from 15 to 7.5. So here we are, when APL is 15, you can see how the APL is 15. And here we are when it's 7.5, so we're going from here to here. Okay, at 15, what was the real GDP? It is $800 billion. At 7.5, it's still $800 billion. Real GDP is not impacted by aggregate price level in the long run. Now I think we're starting to understand why long-run aggregate supply curve is vertical. Price is going up and down, but real GDP, the aggregate output, is not impacted in the long run. So now we know it's vertical, we have to figure out where does it go. So it is placed on the x-axis where we are hitting our potential output. The entire axis is about output. Real GDP is output. But where it hits is our potential output. We're going to label that YP. And what that means is, let's say we are at full employment. So everyone who is seeking a job should have a job theoretically. So if everyone who wants a job has one, all prices are fully flexible, because we're talking about the long run. If those two terms were met, what's our potential? How much could we make? That dollar amount, that amount of output is our potential output, our YP. So on the original drawing on the first slide of the notes, the first page, you can see how at the bottom of the LRAS, it's labeled YP. That is a must. That is a requirement. Every time at the bottom of LRAS, you're going to write YP. That tells us potential output. We're going to do more things with that later, but just knowing where to label it is step one. So our potential output is sometimes called the full employment real GDP because the entire long run curve is telling us where our full employment is. Now, I wanted us to review some things about unemployment. So what is another name for full employment? Hint. The acronym is NRU. All right. So the other name is natural rate of unemployment. So at full employment, does that mean that we have 0% unemployment? No, we're never going to have that. So full employment means we have 4 to 6% unemployment. And what types of unemployment would exist at our potential? Frictional and structural are the two that do exist at our full potential, those we expect. And then what type of unemployment would not exist if we're at full employment? Cyclical, the one that's caused by changes in the business cycle. To make another connection between this model and an earlier one, LRAS represents our economic potential, the maximum amount that we could produce at full employment. And so does the PPC. Remember the production possibilities curve? Looked a little bit something like either this or this, depending on if it had increasing or constant opportunity cost. So both those things are showing us how much we could produce if we're using all of our resources wisely. So this will shift outward if there's growth, right? But so does LRAS. If there's growth in the economy, the entire LRAS will shift to the right. Same thing. We have an outward shift, we have an increase. And it tells us not just that our potential has increased or has grown, but our entire economy has grown. A right shift of AD and a right shift of SRAS does not tell us we had growth. That could just be temporary. LRAS, the long run line, is the one that tells us if we actually grew. So what are the shifters of LRAS? In order for LRAS to move, we have to have a change to long run productivity, not just productivity. If you remember, productivity alone shifts SRAS. Long run productivity shifts LRAS. So an improvement in technology, wiring electricity for an entire village, giving internet access, computers, machinery, all of those things, once you have it, not only are you going to be better now, but you're going to be better years from now. So improvements in technology will shift LRAS to the right. And then things that change either the quantity or quality of the labor force. If your workers are healthier, they can produce more. Their productivity goes up. So health of labor force includes things like nutrition. You might have noticed that we have a food pyramid, or I think it's something else now in America. But the idea is that we want to encourage people to eat well, to not be obese, to be healthy. Because if they're healthier, they're going to live longer, they're going to be more productive workers. We also require certain vaccines. We put fluoride in our water. We do all kinds of things to increase the health of our labor force because that's good for long-run productivity. We also want to educate our workers. You want a labor force that can solve problems. If your workers know how to troubleshoot, if the manager is not available to answer that question, they're able to answer it themselves and move on. And that's really important for productivity. So we do need an educated labor force. And then finally, the size of the labor force. If there's a baby boom and you have more people able to work, then your productivity goes up. And it will go up for years and years and years as long as those people are willing and able to work. So knowing that long-run productivity shifts LRAS, I want to point out that productivity can be a double shift. It is possible that productivity is both short-run and long-run. So this is the deal. We're going to practice the difference. And it's either short-run alone or both. Let me explain. So there are some things that are just going to be helpful to you. And remember, short run is a year or less. So if it only has a short run increase or decrease, then it only shifts SRAS. But if it's something that has long run improvements or long run issues, it's going to be good or bad in the future, but now as well. So we're going to practice those things on the next slide. Remember, our options here are either only a short run or both. Because if it's good in the future, if it's good in a couple of years, it's going to be good now as well. So if it's LRAS, it's both, but it can potentially only be SRAS. First scenario, a power outage hits the West Coast. So that's a bad thing. That's going to decrease productivity. But the question is it going to be a short run thing, year or less, or long run? That one is short run. So SRAS would shift left in that case. Next example, polio vaccinations are required. So that's good. That helps with productivity. Is that going to be helpful in less than a year or now and also into the future? That's long run. You're vaccinated now, but that vaccine lasts many years. So those workers will continue being healthy into the future. So they're not going to get polio this year. They're not going to get polio in the future. So it's going to be LRAS, which will shift both. And by the way, both of them would shift right because they're able to produce more now and able to produce more later. A country gains access to electricity. That sounds short run or long run in both? Long run in both. So once you have that technology improvement, that access to electricity, you have it now and you have it later. It's a long run shifter. Both of them will shift right. Country is hit with an Ebola outbreak. Okay, so will that be a short run issue or a long run issue? That one is long run, and let me explain why. If people are killed by a disease, they are still going to be dead in a few years. And I know that sounds horrible, but I'm running it that way to make it super clear. There's a plague, if there is some sort of horrible war, if there's something that kills your employees and kills your labor force, that will definitely be long run. And they're also less productive now, right? So SRAS and LRAS, because LRAS is always both, and they're both going to shift to the left. Next one, hurricane season floods urban areas. That one is short run. Natural disasters tend to be short run. When New York City was flooded, it was bad for a few months, but SRAS is a year or less, and they were able to fix things, move on, keep moving forward. Now, if this is some sort of disaster that completely wipes out entire villages, then it could potentially be long run. So in that case, SRAS would shift left. And then, sorry, let's get to the answer. I shouldn't have. Country undergoes a bloody civil war. This is a case where they're unable to work now, they're unable to work into the future, either because of the war or because of casualties. So LRAS and SRAS will shift to the left. Now I want to show you how in the world you would actually draw this double shift. All right, so LRAS is shifting to the right. It is increasing. So we're going to have an LRAS2 arrow. The bottom of LRAS is always YP. So now we have a YP2, which means our potential output has increased. So if we're more productive in the long run, we're actually, you're about to learn that we are always on the short run. So where would equilibrium go? Is equilibrium at the top where supply meets supply? Well, no, that's not possible. And we can't put equilibrium at the bottom because we're always on the short run. So if in the long run we're more productive, we're also more productive in the short run. So I know that's kind of a squiggly line. It's hard to draw on the mouse when I do these recordings, as you probably have noticed. But I was very careful to make sure that all three lines intersected at the same point. And that's really important. So when you're drawing these double shifts, your LRAS2 and your SRAS2, they both have to intersect at AD. And now we have an E2. And if we have an E2, we can have a YE2, which is our equilibrium output, and a PE2, which is our equilibrium price level. Knowing that potential output, the bottom of LRAS, is YP. That's where we should be. That's our potential. But we're not always on our potential. So in the real world, the economy is fluctuating. And some years it is higher than our potential, and some years it's lower than potential. If the economy is weak, that means that real GDP would be below YP. And on the ADAS model, if something is below, it's less, that means it's going to be to the left of. So if your equilibrium is to the left of YP, that means that we are not living up to our potential. Other years, the economy is doing really strong. We're in a recovery. We are actually making more than our potential, which is possible, but only temporarily. It's not sustainable. And more than potential, something a higher value, would be to the right of it. So in this line here, in this model, the Congressional Budget Office is an economic entity from the government that tries to calculate these things. The straight line is potential output. So the straight line is the YP. And you can see how some years it's a little bit lower. If it's lower, then our potential is less than. If it's higher, we're doing more than our potential. So less than our potential, the purple numbers here, so this section is less than potential, this section is less than potential, here we have way down. Those are recessionary times. We're making less than our potential output. These periods, we are higher than our potential. Therefore, we're in an inflationary or a recovery period. So we can actually compare actual output to potential output to tell us where we are in the business cycle. In the next module, we're actually going to add aggregate demand and put all the pieces together and learn all the subpoints. So when I was drawing the double shift, I know that you haven't quite gotten all those subpoints yet. No worries, you're going to get that. You'll see it again. I just wanted to introduce you to it. So I wanted to go ahead and show you here. Let's imagine that this was our aggregate demand line. And I drew it intentionally not perfectly lining up because often it won't. So my question to you, what is the definition of equilibrium? What two things are intersecting? Supply and demand. Well, we have demand, but we have two different supplies. So which one is it? Is this our equilibrium, where supply meets demand? Or is this our equilibrium, where supply meets demand? It definitely cannot be this. Because here we have supply with supply. So that's not it. So the answer is this is our equilibrium. And the reason that's important is that we're always on the short run. So let me go ahead and clean this up to make it a little bit more obvious. So here we have our equilibrium. We're always on the short run. So in this case, you can tell that all three of these things are not perfectly lining up. So we have a problem with our economy that we're not on our long run potential. Maybe we're in a recession, maybe we're in an inflation. Now I can tell you a hint. This equilibrium, is it to the right or left of our potential? It's to the right. And right means bigger or smaller. Because right is an increase, so right means bigger. So if we're making more than our potential, then we're not in a recession, are we? We're in a recovery and inflationary time period. Now, you're going to learn that later, no worries, but I just wanted you to see that sometimes we're not quite on point. They don't all perfectly line up. So some years, everything is perfect. Oh, look, yay. All of the points can line up. We're at our potential. And that would be our equilibrium. But that isn't always true. So anytime you're not sure, are we on short run or are we on long run? We are always on short run. And in that situation where we were off, it says at the bottom that SRAS is going to move in order to have everything line up perfectly. So if SRAS has to move, which way would it move that AD, SRAS, and LRAS are all at the same point? If SRAS shifts left, we would have an SRAS 2. Do you see how everything's perfect? We have aggregate demand intersecting with SRAS, so that can now be an equilibrium, but it would be E2 because we had a shift. So you're always on the short run, but if short run does not happen to coincide with long run doesn't move very easily. As the name implies, it's only there in the long run. It'll take a long time. But short run can fluctuate more easily. SRAS will move to fix this gap. Now we need to go through two different examples where we're not on long run and explain why SRAS would move. There's always a reason. So in this situation, we're starting at aggregate price level of P1, production quantity at Y1, which means that this is where we are beginning. So this A1 is our equilibrium. We can label it equilibrium if you would like. So you can tell that our output, our Y1 is our output, is to the right of our potential output. It's greater than our potential output. And if you're making more than your potential, that actually is a problem. It means it's too high. It can't be permanently sustained. Remember that YP, that is at full employment, 4 to 6%. So if unemployment is, if your output is really high, that means your unemployment's even lower than the natural rate. Unemployment can't stay at 2% for long. Something's got to give. So that is an unsustainable point. So we have super high output at Y1. Wages should go up, but they haven't yet because they're sticky. High production leads to low unemployment. That means there's going to be lots of jobs and few people that you can hire for those jobs. So businesses are going to have to raise nominal wages to attract workers. Nominal wages are an SRAS shift. I want to clue you into something here. When I start making you explain these, and it's coming, explanations must involve a shifter. There's three things that shift SRAS: commodity prices, nominal wages, and productivity. If your explanation of the shift doesn't include a shifter, you didn't explain it. So we got to connect it through. Our output is too high, which means unemployment is low. When unemployment is low, businesses will need to raise wages to entice somebody to take those jobs to produce the high output. High nominal wages decrease SRAS. So when SRAS shifts to the left, now we have an E2 that's back on our long run potential where everything lines up. We have one more example here of the opposite situation where our current output level, A1 is here. Our current output level, Y1, is below, it's to the left of our potential. So output is down. If output is down, we're not making very much stuff. People are going to get fired. If people are going to get fired, wages should start falling, but it takes them a while because they're sticky. With that low output, that also means profits are low. Low production leads to high unemployment. If you're not selling much stuff, you can't pay your employees. And with high unemployment, there's going to be so many people looking for work that some desperate person is willing to accept a reduced nominal wage. When nominal wages go down, SRAS shifts to the right, and now we intersect with E2. So, I can summarize it once more. At E1, our output is too low. It's less than our potential. If our output is too low, that means our unemployment is high. Either there aren't enough people working and that's why the output is low, or if output is low, businesses are going to fire people. Either way, it makes unemployment high. And with high unemployment and a lot of people looking for work, somebody's going to be willing to accept less money. Lower nominal wages are going to shift SRAS to the right. I hope you're realizing that these two things are multiple steps. These explanations are not short. So if this is not quite sticking, I recommend going through it a couple of times, watching these two slides more than once to make sure that you do understand each step of these transitions. You have finished normal aggregate supply. In a normal model, you have short-run aggregate supply and long-run aggregate supply, and that's it. So I want to be very clear that this is the exception to the rule. I'm teaching you this because it has been on a few years worth of AP exams. I've seen it more than once, and it's not in your textbook. So I do want to make sure that I introduce you to this concept, but when you are drawing these models, we're going to have short run and long run aggregate supply, and then we're going to have aggregate demand. So those three lines are it. So we're not going to put this weird exception to the rule into our drawings. I just want you to know how it works. All right, so in a rare case of fixed prices economy-wide, we're going to have a horizontal aggregate supply. So far, we have seen short-run aggregate supply that goes like this, right? Diagonal line. It is short-run, it's less than a year, and prices are sticky. So they are slow to change, but they can change. Long run is long-term time frame. It is more than 1 year. LRAS is vertical, and all prices are flexible. Now, it would be very unusual for all prices to be fixed. This would be the government saying that all prices in the economy are going to be locked, they can't change at all. That would be an immediate time frame, less than a year. And in that case, aggregate supply would actually be horizontal. It's a very unusual thing, but I want you to see that we have SRAS that's diagonal, LRAS that's vertical, and in the extreme case, if there's economy-wide fixed prices, in the immediate time frame only, aggregate supply can be horizontal. And here are all the aggregate supplies put together in a visual. I have occasionally seen a question like this with a visual like this on the AP exam, and they'll ask you kind of what's happening in each stage. So let's go through it. If we're in the immediate time frame, we could be in this red horizontal aggregate supply. So that immediate time frame could lead to the short-term time frame where prices are sticky. So we have immediate, prices are fixed. Short-term, prices are sticky. Long-term, this blue line, prices are flexible. If this was the case, you would still have the exact same aggregate demand line that we know and love. It does not change its shape. So it is possible to have a strangely shaped AS because you have horizontal, diagonal, vertical. That's more clear. There we go. But aggregate demand always goes this way. So I know that's very unusual, but I wanted us to see it. So why in the world would aggregate supply ever be horizontal? So this is the explanation. If, and by the way, let me label this aggregate supply. There we go. Okay, if an economy had fixed prices for everything, output would be low. Of course it would. This is kind of like putting a price ceiling on everything in the economy. Nothing can change. So you're not going to want to produce much stuff. There's no incentive. There's no profits because prices can't go up because prices are fixed. So if output is really, really low, that's going to make unemployment go up. And after a little bit of time in this situation, some firms may decide to increase production at the same price level to sell more goods. So we were here, and now we're going to decide to increase the quantity even though the price level didn't change. Because one of those, okay, fine, if I am making $2 per unit at this quantity, and now I'm still making $2 per unit because the price didn't change, but what if I'm making more units? Do you see what I mean? $2 per unit, 100 of them, versus $2 per unit, 1,000 of them, you're still making more money. So sometimes if firms are desperate for profit and they can't make it the old-fashioned way by this aggregate supply level going diagonal, they might decide to produce more at the same price just to make a little bit of money and do the best they can. So this is the odd exception to the rule, only immediate time frame, only fixed prices economy-wide.